Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dharma. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is the second in a series on recollection. We will be going through recollecting what Ven Dr Punnaji has taught us over the years. Today's sharing is about how the mind creates the perception, and from perception, the mind begins to produce concepts. Conceiving ideas. Concepts are nothing but ideas in our mind. And these ideas are what we think is real. It is our own individual, personal concept. There is no such thing as a concept that is common to all. It's basically what we think is real. So let me admit a few more people in. Okay. So now we have someone from New Mexico City joining in. Welcome, Sister Nora. Okay, good. So the mind creates these concepts that we think are real, and from concepts, then we make decisions. That's really what it is all about. So today we're going to take a look at how the mind perceives and then creates concepts. And I will be answering also one question that was posted. Sister Shin mentioned that what's the difference between ditti and mano? So I'll be answering that question further on. Okay, ditti is basically our point of view. You could say it's a form of concept. It's a kind of concept. So what's the difference between ditti and mano? We will come to that later on as we go along. Okay, now I will go through a presentation explaining Ven Dr Punnaji's lessons on Vinyanya and Mano, which he gave bits and pieces all over. What I have today is a compilation, a complete collection of everything that Bhante ever spoke about Vinyanya and Mano. And it's drawn from many, many different places. So there's no one place where he spoke everything in one go. So it's bits and pieces I compiled together, put it all together so that it makes sense. So when I finish the presentation, I'll open up to questions. But if any time during the course of the presentation, if there is something that you feel is very pressing that you really wanted to ask because it is so pressing, okay, you can turn on your mic and let me know. But otherwise, just keep your mic muted. Let me finish and then come to the question and answers towards the end. Okay. So what we will cover, we have covered last week, the three parts of mental experiences. Okay. We spoke about the first one is the Vinyanya. The Buddha used three words to describe what goes on in this thing called mind. And it is a mental experience. So there are three parts of it. The first word the Buddha used was Vinyanya, referring to what Ven Dr Punnaji translates as perception. It is commonly translated as consciousness. Now, the word consciousness alone is not correct. I will explain later on. It is sense consciousness, but not consciousness alone. We'll come to that in a moment. Okay. So the first word the Buddha used is Vinyanya, and Bhante's more precise translation is perception, arising from the process of perception where we become aware of objects that our sense organs pick up. That means we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. The second word the Buddha used is Mano, which is the cognitive process, or commonly called thinking, or intellect, or intelligence, whatever word that fits. But basically, the words from psychology would be cognition and conception, based on the cognitive process, the way the mind interprets and creates ideas. So that is the interpretation of what we have perceived, and the ideas coming as concepts. And with concepts, we have choices what to do. The third word the Buddha used to describe the mind is chitta, which Ven Dr Punnaji very precisely explained that it is associated with our emotions, right? And he calls it mood and temperament. In the field of psychology, it is called the affective process. Mood basically refers to how we feel about something, and temperament is what we want to do about it. So in a nutshell, that is basically the three words that describe the three parts of mental experiences, which we all call mind. Using the word mind does not adequately explain what each word means. Every time each of these words appears, when the translators see the word Vinyanya, they say consciousness. When they see the word Mano, they say mind. Then when they see the word Chitta, they say mind. So to them, the explanation of Mano and Chitta are identical, which is not. Bhante Punnaji has pointed out, whenever the Buddha uses the word Chitta, he was referring to the emotional part of the mind. And when the Buddha used the word Mano, he was referring to the thinking part of the mind. So that is the essence of Bhante Punnaji's lessons over the years. We're going to explore a little bit further about Vinyanya and how it interacts with Mano. Now, one important thing I want to point out, our mind is very existential thinking, meaning we like to think of things to exist in physical form. So the mind is locked into physical existences. We are also locked into time. So when I say that Vinyanya arises, followed by Mano, followed by Chitta, you think it's like as though, oh, Vinyanya is one thing, Mano is another thing. No, it's not. All three are really the actual mental experience. They arise one after another, but we don't use time to measure the after, one after another. It's just arising. Vinyanya is the condition that leads to the arising of the Mano. Mano is the condition that leads to the arising of Chitta. This conditional arising is very detailedly explained in Bhante Punnaji's explanation of the Paticca Samuppada, which we will deal with at a later stage. We just go through all these small little concepts first, small little ideas, understand these little things, then we will put it all together under Paticca Samuppada. So that's really how we're going to approach this. So don't think of these three parts as completely separate. They are not. They are interrelated. One is a condition of the other. When Vinyanya arises, Mano arises. When Mano arises, Chitta arises. There is no separation there. Okay? So we will see how it all comes together in this thing called Paticca Samuppada. And Bhante Punnaji translated this very accurately by breaking it down into the root words, the three root words. The first root word is coming before or preceding, something that happens first. Then being means the actual thing that arises. And some means simultaneous at the same time. And finally, coming into being, arising. So basically, when something happens, the prati part, as a result of that, the moment this condition arises in the prati, then itiya will arise at the same time, and this arising is utpada. That's why it's called pratiya samutpada, or in Pali, it is paticca samuppada. And Bhante Punnaji calls this concurrence of logical antecedents. All the other translators, many of them call them the 12 links of dependent origination. So in a way, it is a dependent origination. Something originates or arises depending on the presence of the necessary conditions. So in the same way, when we speak about the Vinyanya arising, the Mano arising, and the Chitta arising, these are the conditional arising. As soon as Vinyanya arises, Mano arises. As soon as Mano arises, Chitta arises. So now we're going to examine these arising. But in order for us, our existential mindset, to make sense of it, I will explain in such a way that it appears to be some three different things, but they are really the same thing we all call mind. It's just three different mental experiences, one arising one after another. So let's take a look at what's the difference between experiential and existential. It's very important to understand this point, because if you don't understand this point, you will keep getting confused about the Buddha's teaching, and you will definitely not agree with Bhante Punnaji's teaching, because Bhante Punnaji's lessons is really based on the true teachings of the Buddha. The true teaching of the Buddha is that everything is experiential. Nothing exists. So what's the difference? When we talk about something exists, we're talking about entity. Entity refers to physical object. So this is an entity. It's a physical object. It's a computer mouse. It exists in space and time. That means it occupies space, right? And there is a time involved. Whatever it is, it will decay over time. Eventually, it will rust, or it will break down, or it will become moldy, whatever, over time. So physical objects are like that. You know, they occupy space, and over time, they begin to decay, they begin to change. So entity is referring to these physical objects. Entity is an existential concept. An existential concept means our mind thinks of it in terms of occupying space and time. Whereas activity is the process of happening, the rising and falling, the rising and fading away. What arises must fade away. And this is really the teachings of the Buddha, because activity leads to experiencing the arising and the fading away, which Buddha calls anicca, rising and fading. You know, and it is commonly translated as impermanence. The reason anicca is translated as impermanence is because whatever the Buddha was referring to, it arises and it fades away. Nothing remains unchanged. And this whole thing of arising and fading away is activity. And the only way we know activity is happening is we experience it, the experiencing. You cannot say it physically exists, but we experience it. The same thing, this thing about the mind. When we talk about the mind is an experience. We are experiencing it. The only reason that we are aware there is a mind is because we are experiencing the thinking. We're experiencing the perceiving. We're experiencing the conceiving and the concepts. We're experiencing the emotions. All this is experiencing. And this is activity. Rise and fall. Every emotion arises and fades away. Every thought arises and fades away. There is no such thing as a thought arising in your mind and stay there forever or stay there for a long time. It doesn't happen like that. It keeps arising, yes, maybe. You know, you're disturbed by a certain thought, so this thought keeps arising and arising, okay? So it appears to be there all the time, but no, it's arising and fading away, arising and fading away. Let's say you experience something emotional, and this emotion keeps disturbing you, and you think that this emotion is stuck in your mind always. No, it keeps coming and going, coming and going. So it's rising and fading. That's really what emotions are all about. Or any experience we have, any activity is rising and fading. And that's why it is called anicca, the rising and fading away of any activity. That is anicca. So Buddha's teaching is experiential. It's about activities happening, rising and fading away. That's why one of the most fundamental thing we have to understand is anicca, dukkha, anatta. Because of this arising and fading away continuously, it leads to our dissatisfaction of what's going on. And we begin to feel stressed, and that's dukkha. And then as a result of that, it blurs our mind. But the reality behind it is there is no eternal being behind all this. Everything we know about ourselves, about everything goes on in the world, it's all rising and fading away, rising and fading away. So this is really the experiential perspective. We have to think in terms of experiential perspective. And this is why when the Buddha used the word rupa, the Buddha was referring to mental image. When we see something, when you see this object, your mental image of this object is the rupa. Because it is something that arises in your mind. It arises and fades away when the sense organ, your eyeball, stimulated by activities in the environment. That means the light reflected from the environment, reflected from this object entering your eyes, and then you become aware there is this object. right? And that is because when light enters your eye, it triggers a chain reaction, which is a sense stimulation. It produces your experience of seeing. You're seeing this object, and that arises in your mind. So in a way, you could say that seeing this object is eye consciousness. So in other words, it's relating to the eye being conscious of what it has seen. Right? That's it. So it's why it's called eye consciousness. The word consciousness alone is not a correct word to explain Vinyanya, because consciousness means a much bigger thing, which I will come to in a moment. So, but it is really only eye consciousness when we speak about Vinyanya from the eye, or Vinyanya of the eye. We'll touch on that in a moment. What is Vinyanya of the eye, the nose, the tongue, and so on. We'll come to that. So now I want you to all take a clear view that whatever we explain, it's all about experiential, right? Not existential. Okay? So that's the difference between experiential and existential. Think of things as activity arising and fading away, not in terms of that physical thing, right? So the mind is something that is continuously arising and fading away of mental objects, rupa, mental images rising. Your mind is really a continuous flow of mental objects or mental images, right? And it keeps rising and fading away, rising and fading away. That's really what the mind is. So that's why it's rising. Rupa refers to this mental object that arises in your mind and fades away because your eyeball was stimulated by activities in the environment, such as light reflected from the object, the object entering your eyes, right? And it triggered a chain reaction inside your body. And this chain reaction is called sense stimulation, stimulating your sensory system, your visual sensory system. And it produces this experience of seeing, right? So this chain reaction produces the experience of seeing, eye perception, or eye consciousness. The awareness of object is a form of consciousness, but that is just a very minor form of consciousness, being conscious of objects that you have seen. So that's really what eye consciousness means. We'll deal with that in more detail in a moment, okay? So now bear in mind, use an experiential thinking when you hear whatever that I'm explaining, okay? Just give me a second, I'll double check some people are coming in. What happened? Oh. Okay, never mind. Someone has left. Okay, let's carry on. Okay, let's take a look at the experience of seeing so that we can understand what is Vinyanya and what is Mano. In order for this lady to see the dog, the person must be there with good working eyes. A blind person cannot see the dog. So a person with good working eyes, and there is a dog out there. If there's no dog out there, then there is no dog to be seen. But that is not enough, because all experiences arises dependent on the presence of necessary conditions. So if it is completely pitch dark, can the lady see the dog? No. So there must be light. So there must be light reflected from the dog, reflected light entering the eyes, entering the sense organ, the eyes. And this causes a sense stimulation. So light is the stimulus. Light is the external activity that triggers a chain reaction. Now, as I pointed out, it is an activity. Light is an activity that is reflected from the dog entering the eyes. And when that person is paying attention, the person becomes aware. So if you're not paying attention, you will not be aware. You know, even though your eyes may be pointing at the right direction, if you're not paying attention to what's happening in front of you, you may not be aware what's going on. You may not be able to see, even though your eyes are pointing in that direction. It happens to all of us. That's why sometimes something happens in front of our eyes and we didn't realize it happened. We said, oh, I didn't see that. It's not because you didn't see that. It's because you were not paying attention. Even though your face is pointed towards that object and something happened, and if you're not paying attention, you don't notice it happening. So therefore, that's why sometimes we say, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't notice that. Oh, I didn't notice you were here. Even though, you know, in a room of many friends, suddenly another friend came in, but your eyes could be directed towards that friend, but you didn't notice that person coming in. Later on, you realize, oh, you have arrived, you know. It's because you were not paying attention to that person entering the room. So attention is very important. And there is a process of perception giving rise to this mental object arising in the mind. That's why it's experiential, the experience of seeing, experiential, okay? And this is just an experience. That's all there is. This is what Vinyanya is all about. So up to this point, what we have covered is Vinyanya, the perception arising, which is, you know, ending up in a mental image arising, Vinyanya. But at the same time, like I pointed out, this is not like as though they are separate process. As soon as the mental image arises, Mano takes over. So now let's stop at this point. We freeze at this point. That we're talking about the process of seeing, the experience of seeing. This is the Vinyanya. And therefore, this is the experience of seeing we call Vinyanya, which is perception. We can say this is sense consciousness. That means eye consciousness, right? So we can say it is eye consciousness. So we just stick to the seeing. We can also use the same explanation for other forms of consciousness, but let's just say eye consciousness, okay? And not just the big word consciousness. The big word consciousness means a lot of other things, right? So it must be qualified by sense consciousness. So when people translate the word Vinyanya without qualifying it as sense consciousness or eye consciousness, they simply say consciousness. It's not correct. It gives the wrong impression what you can understand Vinyanya to mean, okay? Bhante Punnaji calls it perception because we are able to perceive an object through our eyes, okay? So awareness of what was perceived through the sense organs, in this case, the eyes. So that's why it's called perception. And Bhante's translation is very precise here, okay? Now, moving on, then what is Mano? Okay, all right, now we come to the next part. As soon as a mental object arises in the mind because of reflected light, so this reflected light entering the eyes, the reflected light entering the eyes are called chakku. It produces the experience of seeing or sight, and mental image arises in the mind, the rupa. Rupa is the mental image of what you saw with your eyes. Gandha, the next one, is the mental image of what you have smelled with your nose, because odors entering the nose, triggering a sense stimulation of the whole olfactory system, the smelling system. And nose is called ganya. So the experience of having smelling something, right? The mental object of what you smell is called gandha. The same with the tongue. When your tongue comes into contact with some flavors, then it triggers the sense experience or the sense stimulation, leading to the experience of rasa, which is taste, something you taste. The same with touching with your hand, kaya, tangibles, objects coming into contact with the hand, right? The coming into contact, you touch something, and the mind is aware of something being touched, potaba, okay? That's the touching. The same with hearing, sadda. Sadda is referring to the hearing sounds, and because of your ears, sota. Now notice, these are root words. The sadda and the sota are root words to the Pali term sutra. When we say sutra, why is it called sutra? Why is the teaching of the Buddha called a sutra? Or rather, a Buddha sermon is called sutra? Because in ancient times, there were no books. Nobody wrote it down on a piece of paper. There was no paper. People wrote it on leaves if they could write anything. There was no book. There was no paper. Paper was not yet invented. So people learn lessons by hearing, using the sota. So using the sota to learn something, that's why the lesson you learn is called the sutra. So sutra came from the root word sota. So now you know something interesting. This was told to me by Ven Dr Punnaji, by the way. Although he didn't publicly say it, but he mentioned this to me, that sota is really referring to the ear that is hearing. And when we talk about sutra, it is because we heard the Buddha speak those things in ancient times. People learn by hearing, word of mouth, right? That's it. And that's why the monks in ancient times chant a lot, because by chanting, they are repeating what the Buddha said. And chanting these sutras will allow them to remember what the Buddha was saying. Right? So that's something interesting to learn. Okay. Now, these are 5 physical senses detecting what's going on in the environment. They enter the mind and they come together in the mind. The coming together in the mind is the 6th sense called Mano. Okay. With Mano, we begin to recognize what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, or touch. This is the cognitive process called Mano. And that's why it's called Mano Vinyanya. Now, Mano Vinyanya is a little bit different from Chakku Vinyanya. Chakku Vinyanya is the eye consciousness. Mano Vinyanya is the mind consciousness. But Mano Vinyanya is a little bit different from Chakku Vinyanya. Right? So all the other 5 Vinyanya, Chakku Vinyanya, Ghana Vinyanya, Jiva Vinyanya, Kaya Vinyanya, and Sota Vinyanya, they are different from Mano Vinyanya. These 5 are similar in that sense of different senses, but Mano Vinyanya is something a little different. It's putting together all the 5 different sense experience and forming a more complete experience. Okay, and forming of this more complete experience is the Mano Vinyanya. So what's the difference? When we talk about the 5 sensory perceptions, 5 senses, right? Rupa is the mental image arising from what we see with the eyes, the chakku. It is perception, what was perceived by the sense organs. But the mind, the Mano Vinyanya, is different. It's cognition. What we recognized by categorization of what was perceived. Okay, so this is Mano Vinyanya. Okay, so the Mano is the part of the 6 sensual fields that put it all together. So Mano is not just one of the sensory fields. It's the 6 sensory fields that is capable of putting it all together. So this is another part of mental experience. The first part of mental experience are producing perception from the 5 senses. Then the second part of mental experience is the 6th sense, putting it all together, forming concepts and so on. So when we talk about Vinyanya, the difference between perception and consciousness, now we deal with the word consciousness. Perception is talking about the 5 physical senses mentioned here. Okay, eye perception, or some call it eye consciousness. I don't like to use the word eye consciousness. I prefer to use the word eye perception, because it's the eyes that perceive, right? Perceive is the processing of what the eye has sensed from the environment, seeing visuals. And then in the case of the ears, hearing sounds, smelling odors, tasting flavors, and touching tangibles. But when we talk about consciousness, it is the Mano. The Mano itself is the cognition of sense perceptions. That means bringing together these 5 sense perceptions, forming more complete ideas. And what are they forming? First, by identification, categorized identification. This is called papancha, sanya, sanka. This word is found commonly across many sutras. And then the second is a recognition by giving it the mental image, rupa, a name, nama. So in the case of what we see with the eyes, the mental image arising is rupa. And then we call it something. We call this object a computer mouse, right? So the mental image of this object in the mind is rupa, and the word computer mouse is the name we give it, the label, labeling. And finally, cognizing the experience, putting it all together, forming concepts. Now we have concepts, okay? So this is the concept created, the idea that there is something out there, okay? So this is the part which is something that we have to realize. The mind does more than just becoming aware. It now produces ideas. Now, these concepts are not absolute. That means each person has a different concept, even though they are all looking at the same object, right? So, like I used in the example the last time, this silver alarm clock. In some people's mind, you look at this, you say, oh, nice alarm clock. Another person will say, oh, it's silver. I like blue. I don't like silver. And then another person will say, ah, this reminds me of the black alarm clock I have. Looks almost the same. You see, every one of you have a different idea arising in your mind when you see this object. So each of us has a different concept every time our sense experience tells us we have now experienced something in the environment. So in other words, every one of us has our own version of what we think is real. That's why the word reality. Reality is not truth. Reality is what each of us think is real for us, right? So when somebody walks by, let's say an elderly lady with a lot of makeup, to some elderly ladies, this elderly lady who is very good at making up and looks very nice, they will say, oh, she's a beautiful lady because she knew how to use makeup to make herself look younger. So another elderly lady would be a little bit envious, nothing wrong with that, just realizing, this lady knows how to use makeup, make herself look beautiful. So in their mind, they see this elderly lady with nice makeup going by and say, oh, this is a beautiful lady. But to a youngster, a young kid, looks at this elderly lady, thinks of his own grandmother or whatever, and then the grandmother never do any makeup and always look very untidy. Then maybe this young kid or youngster will think, oh, this elderly lady looks so ugly. So now the question is, what is true? Is that elderly lady beautiful or is that elderly lady ugly? You see? To another elderly lady who doesn't know how to make up properly and envious of this elderly lady who does good makeup, to her, this elderly lady is beautiful. But to a youngster who is reminded of her grandmother, who always is very untidy, never keep herself looking good, will think this elderly lady is ugly. So there is no absolute truth. Is this lady beautiful or ugly? There is no absolute truth. There are only different realities to different people. To an old woman, this elderly lady, the concept or the reality is this lady is beautiful. To the youngster, the concept is this elderly lady looks very ugly because she looks so old, right? So now I hope you understand concepts are not absolute. Each one of us create a different concept, okay? So therefore, we have covered this thing called perception, how we perceived. And now we're going to take a look at the cognizing process, how the mind processes it by interpreting it, and then by creating the concepts. How does the mind create concepts? Concepts arise with the dichotomy of experience, the object versus the subject. That means when we see something, without realizing it, unknowing to every single one of us. Every time we experience seeing something, the mind automatically, due to our own upbringing or existential background, we always separate. We see that object out there, and I'm the subject, I'm the one inside here, seeing that object out there. We separate. That's why the word dichotomy. Dichotomy means breaking it into two parts. And what are the two parts? The object, which is out there, and the subject that is in here. We do that. So concepts arise as soon as we begin to break things up into two parts. Right? What we have experienced is seeing, but then the mind breaks that seeing into two parts. Let's go back to that lady seeing the dog. Okay, so what happened in that case? First, light is reflected from the dog or reflected from the object, enters the eye. And because of this process of perception, the five aggregates, panchakanda, Vinyanya arises. Right? The mind is now aware of what was seen with the eyes, seeing, hearing, sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. So 5 different physical senses. But here we are dealing with the seeing part only. So the mind has the Vinyanya. So when the mind sees the dog, the mind is aware there is a mental object of the dog. So this is really Vinyanya, the mental object of the dog. And then the mind begins to interpret. Now, how does the mind interpret? The mind interprets by drawing from memory of past experiences. The reason why you recognize this to be a computer mouse is because you have seen hundreds of computer mouse before. You may even have seen something similar to this particular model of computer mouse. And the moment your eyes catch sight of this and your mind has this mental image arising, it draws from memory of all the mouse you've seen, connecting it, papancha, and then producing the awareness. So this is called recognition. And it produces what is called recognition. So recognition is now becoming aware of this object and giving it a name, calling it dog, so to speak. So this is really the concept. You have now created a concept because of this recognition. And this is your own personal concept. Each one of us has a different personal concept every time we see something. So the concept of an entity identified as a dog, and we call this a dog, and that is nama. So rupa is the mental image, nama is the name we call it. Okay. So that is really what is happening. Up to this point, there's mental image arising, but the mano comes in at the same time to begin to interpret this mental image and bring up this thought in the mind. I see a dog out there. Naturally, that's what it is. So the first thing that comes to your mind when you catch sight of a dog is, I see a dog out there, isn't it? The first time you look at this, your mind says, I see Billy holding a computer mouse. See? So I see a dog out there. So the experience of seeing is now categorized, and it is actually broken into two parts. This breaking, as I said, is called dichotomy. Breaking it into two parts. What are the two parts? The first part is this thing called dog out there. So there's a dog out there, and that is called the objective experience, or loka. Loka actually translated to mean the world, but a more precise meaning of the word loka is whatever is happening so-called out there, in the world out there, so to speak. So there is this objective experience of something out there. And there is this other experience. Now, if there is something out there, there must be something in here. And that is the I see. So you look at that sentence, I see a dog out there. So dog out there is the objective experience. I see is the subjective experience, the atta, the sense of self. That's why the moment we experience something from any of our senses, the mind automatically breaks it into two parts, dichotomize or dichotomy of experience into objective and subjective. what is so-called out there and what is so-called in here, right? So it's always like that. You know, if somebody was shouting at you and saying very bad words or unnice words, words that are not nice, or scolding you, your mind thinks, he is scolding me. Okay, so he is scolding me. So what is the first word? He, right? And then what is happening? Scolding. And then what's scolding who? Scolding me. So he is out there doing the scolding, me. Just like here, the dog is out there and there's I seeing it. The experience is seeing, right? So if somebody was scolding you, your mind says, he is scolding me. So it's the he is out there, the scolding is the activity, and the me is in here. And we tend to think the object and the subject are physical existence. It is normal for our mind to think like that, thinking of existence, existential thinking. Our mind naturally inclines towards existential thinking. Okay, so this is really how the mind breaks it into two parts and creating the concept. Therefore, the mind begins to have this concept called projecting the concept of an object identified as a dog out there. Okay, I have a, okay. All right, someone just dropped a question. Does papancha mean bunch of thoughts also? Okay, papancha, actually, if we go back to Bhante Punnaji's explanation, okay, let me just go back. This is important. Okay. Papancha is really interpreting what was perceived by drawing from memory. Okay. And this interpretation leads to recognition. A concept is created. Now, many people translate papancha to mean mental proliferation. Well, you know, mental proliferation is not a very good word to explain papancha. Mental proliferation is a psychological term that means as a result of what one experiences, the mind begins to create a whole series of concepts arising where we now have choices, and these concepts are very disturbing concepts to us. That's why the mind, mental proliferation. And some people call this bunch of thoughts. It's really not bunch of thoughts. It is really drawing from past experiences to interpret what was perceived through the eyes and then coming up with a concept. Okay, so I hope that answers this question. Answers the question of that is this a bunch of thoughts? Just look at the question again. Does papancha mean bunch of thoughts also? So actually, it really does not mean bunch of thoughts. It means drawing from memory of the past. Maybe that's what they mean, bunch of thoughts, memory of the past arising, to try to figure out what has been perceived by the sense organ. That's why it's called bunch of thoughts, because a lot of thoughts are arising. Now, this is happening very, very fast. We are not aware of this. We are not aware precisely how papancha works. But papancha only happens to normal beings like us who are not enlightened. The Arahan does not use papancha. In other words, the Arahan, being aware of what he has seen, he's just aware that he has seen something. He doesn't start having concepts. And Arahan does not create concepts in the mind. And that's why some people use this papancha to mean mental proliferation. But mental proliferation is a little bit more than just this bunch of thoughts, okay? Or more than just this recognition. I will explain this mental proliferation at a later sharing, either number 3 or number 4. I will explain that because that affects us, how we start to think I exist. The notion of I, me, or mine, right? So in other words, this papancha It's not mental proliferation, but mental proliferation is something beyond just papancha, and that creates the notion that the I exist, the notion of existence. I will show you in a moment the difference. Okay, I'll come to that in a moment. So bear with me for a little while. So we've basically covered that these three parts of mental experience and how they interrelate. So let's go back to this fundamental activity, the process of seeing, right? The experience of seeing, light entering the eyes, stimulating the eyes, and then we become aware. And this five aggregate, panchakanda, arises. We are seeing objects, mental image arise. The mind now processes it with papancha and recognizing what was perceived, right? Using memory of the past. This memory of the past is going so fast, we are not aware of it. The whole process of recognizing something happens as little as less than 100 milliseconds, a fraction of a second. You won't even know it's happening. Not even 100 milliseconds. It's happening so fast. You're not even aware of it. It goes so fast. I cannot answer whether or not an Arahan will be aware of it, but Arahan does not experience this conceptualizing. But it's only people like us who are unenlightened. We begin to conceptualize because this memory from past, right, can be very distorted. We never remember the past exactly as it happened. We always remember the past with a lot of things added onto it, some flavoring. We call it adding salt and sugar to it, you know. If it was an experience of something that was pleasant, we begin to add more sugar to it. It becomes a sweeter experience. But if it was something unpleasant, we start to add a bit of vinegar to it. It becomes very sour experience, you see. So the memory of the past is never pure, never accurate. It is added with salt, sugar, vinegar, whatever, depending on the experience. Pleasant experience, we add a lot of sugar to it. Unpleasant experience, we add a lot of salt to it, you know, contaminating it, contaminating the memory itself. So this is really what's going on with the Mano, drawing from memory of the past. And then every experience we recall, every experience we experience seeing, every time, there is a feeling, whether it is something pleasant, something unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Right? So that is arising because of the chitta. Now, I draw these three things, Vinyanya, Mano, Chitta, as though they are three different blocks, but they are not three different things. They're all three things of the mind. It's just that one is happening after another almost simultaneously. Don't think of it as there is a time separation between them, okay? So as soon as we are aware of what it is, giving it a name, then there is this feeling whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. And this is called emotions. That's why Bhante keeps saying chitta is our emotional mind. The psychologists call this the affective process because it affects us. And I'll show you how it affects us. Emotions, right, or the Pali word for it is chitta, the emotional mind, have two dimensions. The first is it's physiological. That means to do with the body, the activities in the body. The second is activity in the mind, psychological. So it's both physiological and psychological. Emotion is not purely one thing. In other words, emotion is not purely unhappy thoughts. No, it is not purely psychological. There is also a physiological component to it. Right? I'll show you what the physiological component is in a moment. Whatever it is, there are two parts of the activity. The first part is arousal, and the second part is the reaction. Something is aroused, stimulated, something is triggered, and then there is a reaction. Okay, so let's take a look at the physiological arousal and reaction. Because we experience something pleasant or unpleasant, the chitta, the affective process arises, and when this happens, there is an activity in the brain that triggers a chain reaction to release hormones in the body. Okay, so when it is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant, the emotional mind begins to trigger a chain reaction releasing hormones in the body. So this is an unconscious emotional arousal. This arousal is a biochemical reaction in the body, biochemical reaction of the organism. And it causes tension to the mind, right? Mind and body. It's actually tension in the body, but it also disturbs the mind. So we're only talking about, at this point in time, the physiological effect. So there's tensions in the body. You see, when you have stress hormones flooding your body, right, then you become all tense, right? So these are stress hormones flooding the body, causing tensions in the body. And this tension in the body is a physical suffering. So it is called dukkha, stress. In this context, the word dukkha is referring to the physical suffering. When the Buddha spoke about 5 stages of suffering, he used dukkha to refer to the physical suffering, another word for the mental suffering, and that is domanassa. I'll come to that in a moment. So this word dukkha here is not referring to the mass of suffering as a whole, but just specifically the bodily, the physiological suffering because of stress hormones in the body. And that causes a lot of tensions in the body, disturbing the body. So this is the physiological disturbance, commonly called stress, creating this fight or flight reaction in the body. Fight is when you experience something unpleasant, you want to get rid of it, push it away. That is fighting it. Flight is running away. When something unpleasant is experienced, you want to avoid it, you want to get away from it. Right? So you either want to fight it or you want to run away from it because it is causing so much tension in the body. And then because of the tension in the body, the chitta is disturbed. Now comes what is called mental proliferation. This part of the mind, disturbance of the mind, is a psychological disturbance which is called mental proliferation. This is the part of the mind that disturbs the thinking. So the chitta here is fighting against the mano. The chitta is disturbing the mano, causing a whole bunch of thoughts. So this is really the mind going crazy with all kinds of thoughts. Usually in this case, very unwholesome thoughts. Thoughts like, I hate this, I want to get rid of this. Oh, this is something disturbing me. Or I want to kill him because he's making me so upset. I want to get rid of him. I'm going to kill him. All these things. The lobha, dosa, moha arises. This is really mental proliferation, or what people incorrectly translate papancha as. Papancha is not mental proliferation. This is mental proliferation. You can see it happens long after papancha, because papancha happens when mano arises, but then this happens when the chitta reacts. Chitta is aroused by the tension in the body, the stress, and then the chitta reacts with all kinds of emotional thoughts popping up. Okay? And this is causing what is called distress, domanassa, mental suffering. So physical suffering in this case is dukkha, stress, and mental suffering is distress, domanassa. So the Buddha mentioned about the 5 different levels of suffering. Oh, somebody came back in. Okay. So stress, as I said, in this case, the word dukkha is used by the Buddha to refer to the physical suffering, stress. And the word domanassa is referring to the mental suffering called distress. Right? So this is the differentiation between the word dukkha and domanassa at the fine level. Although the word dukkha is also used to mean suffering as a whole, but in this case, specifically when we talk about the 5 different stages of suffering, then dukkha is referring to the physical suffering. Can you mute your mic? I think typo chin. Okay, good. So we have physical suffering, mental suffering. The mind is disturbed by the mental proliferation. And when the mind is disturbed with mental proliferation, all these unwholesome concepts, right? Again, the word concept, created by Mano, because of the disturbance of the chitta, all these unwholesome concepts arising, the mental proliferation, cause us to want to react in some way. And this wanting to react is called cetana, or volition. Cetana has to do with the reaction of the chitta wanting to do something, right? So it's an intention to do something, volition. With volition, the intention to do something, this comes with either lust or greed, aversion or hatred, or delusion of self-centered existence. Lobha, dosa, moha. Lust or greed. First, when something happens that we don't like, something that is unpleasant, we begin pleasant. Let's start with the pleasant because of the lobha. If it is something pleasant, it becomes something we like. Liking turns to lust. Lust means we want more. Then lust turns to greed. Greed means we're not going to give it up. We want to hang on to it. We want to cling on to what we get. So that is lobha, if it is something pleasant. If it is something unpleasant, it creates dosa, the intention of dosa, the volition of dosa. Dosa begins with dislike. Oh, it's not like nice. I don't like it. Dislike leads to aversion. Aversion comes from the root word avoid. We want to avoid it, get away from it. But we can't always get away from it. We can't always get rid of what we don't like. And if we can't get rid of what we don't like, and if we can't run away from what we don't like, we end up experiencing hatred. We become angry and hateful towards it. So that's hatred. So dosa can lead to hatred because we can't get rid of it. And then moha is this delusion of self-centered existence. These are more thoroughly explained in the condition called kama tanha. Tanha means reaction, emotional reaction. So kama tanha, vibhava tanha, and bhava tanha. I spoke about this in the last presentation. So you can go back to the notes from the previous sharing. You can find a more detailed explanation of the connection between lobha and kama tanha, dosa and vibhava tanha, moha and bhava tanha. So go back to the notes of recollection number 1 and you will find this explanation. Okay? So when we have this intention to do something, we begin to take action. And that is karma, our karma. And very often when we take action, it is unskillful action. So volition, okay, let's go back to affection. The chitta arises, it is pleasant or unpleasant, the mind gets disturbed, then it leads us to choices. We may choose unwholesome choices. We have now an intention to do something, volition, cetana, and with that, we now take action. Our actions are often unskillful when it is not done with clear thought, and that is karma. When we take unwholesome action, it causes a consequence. Consequence is vipaka. This is why when people speak of karma, they're talking about the action. When they speak about the consequence, they're talking about vipaka. In the Western world, it's commonly mistranslated that karma means consequence. No. When we say it's your karma, it doesn't mean that is the consequence. Karma is saying it's your action, your own action or inaction that leads to this outcome, consequence called vipaka. And the consequence is now affecting us one way or another, comes back to stimulate our senses. So in other words, if somebody shouted at me, very angry with me, shouted at me for some reason, rightly or wrongly, and I got very angry, so angry that I punch him in the face. Punching him in the face causes him to fight back. See, all this fighting becomes stimulus to us again. So in other words, an action doesn't end. When I punch him in the face, he punched me back. And I punch him again, he punched me even harder. And then I call my friends to punch him, and he calls his gang to come after me. So it never ends. So it continuously unwholesome action, right? Unskillful action. And all this is coming back to haunt me, coming back to stimulate. So this is a vicious cycle. Right? So if we are doing something unwholesome, it becomes a vicious cycle. So this is really what this whole process is all about. Okay? So I hope it is now clear how this Vinyanya interacts with Mano, interacts with Chitta, leading to our karma, or our Chetana, which is our volition, leading to our karma, which is our action, and finally producing the vipaka, which is the consequence. Okay, so when we speak about Mano as a concept, in answer to the question, unfortunately, the person who asked the question has left the room. Never mind. This question is, what is the difference between Ditti and Mano? Ditti is just a form of concept. Ditti does not mean it is right or wrong. Ditti is just a concept we have in our mind. A point of view. Another way of describing Ditti or concept is a point of view. That means a certain ideas we have. When we think of something with a certain ideas, there is a point of view. That is Ditti. If we have good points of view, then we have Samaditi. The way to cultivate good points of view, right? So I won't deal with the negative. I won't deal too much with the unwholesome part of it. But the way to cultivate good points of view so that we think good concepts rather than bad concepts is sampajana. Sampajana is the ability to discern right view from wrong. That means when something happens, we're able to discern. That means we see the difference between what seems to be good for us, what seems to be bad for us. And we're able to discern these two, what is good and what is bad. And this is done through comprehension of realities. That means we understand what is really happening to us. Comprehension of realities with intelligent consideration and reflection. That's what sampajana refers to. The process of being able to discern what is good for us versus what is bad for us, because we have understood, comprehended the reality of life, and using our intelligence, our mano, the thinking, the smart thinking we have, the intellectual thinking, to then be able to consider and reflect on it and realize what is good and what is bad for us. Okay, so this is really what in answering that question. What is the difference between Ditti and Mano? So, Sister Shin, I hope that answered your question.
Brother Billy, in that case, can I ask you another question related with concept and papancha? What's the difference then? Because papancha, just now you
I
say
have
that.
already explained it.
No. You say papancha. Papancha is like, the ideas that you collect. But what about the
No. Papancha is not ideas. See, papancha is basically the interpretation, categorized identification. So in other words, when you see this object and your mind says it's a blue mouse, that is papancha.
Oh, it's just identification.
Identification.
Oh.
Papancha is actually the identification part. Now, having identified it, your mind goes further and start to think, oh, it's nice, I like it. Then you have a good feeling, good mood. Or, no, I don't like blue mouse. Then you have a bad feeling, bad mood. And because of that, it creates some kind of mental proliferation. Your mind begins to think, oh, I hate blue mouse. Blue mouse is not nice. I don't want it. I want a black mouse. I want a green mouse. So that is a kind of concept and choices. That is mental proliferation. That is not papancha. Papancha is just that part there, categorized identification. That is papancha. Beyond that is concept already, conceptual thinking. The mind begins to create these concepts. And this is really mental proliferation. The mind runs away with all kinds of concepts.
can we say, I really want to understand. So papancha is actually a verb. Concept is actually a noun. Is that what?
Yeah, you could say papancha is the process of interpreting what was perceived, right? And concept is really going beyond that. You begin, usually concept arise after you feel it is pleasant or unpleasant. And then you begin to have all kinds of concepts about what you have just experienced. So in other words, knowing this is a blue mouse, realizing, oh, it's just a blue mouse. That's it. That is factual, categorized identification. So in other words, papancha is dealing with more like factual things, but realize papancha is drawing from past memory. And in the past memory, there may be certain things which are not pleasant. So papancha may create the identification in an unpleasant way or unwholesome way. But that is not mental proliferation. After papancha, you become aware of what it is. And because of what it is, you begin to feel how you feel about it. And then you begin to react. That is actually the reaction, is the chitta.
In papancha, or is it the moment already taking things personal? Does it
Come again?
When you're at when the mano is at papancha, is it still is already taking things personal?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh.
Because okay, papancha is not papancha is a personal interpretation, but you're not yet taking it personally. You only begin to take it personally as a result of your chitta. See, like I said, don't think of it as three separate things. They are happening all at the same time. Because of papancha, then there is concepts created. Because of concepts, then you begin to like or dislike, and you begin to react. So you have vedana and then tanha. And then you begin to have the chetana to react, take action, your karma arises. So all these are one arising after the other continuously, right? So papancha is purely the interpretation. We have some chat items. What is comprehension of reality? Okay, I'll come to that later. Is there a Pali word for mental proliferation? I'll come to that later. So let's continue with this. So in other words, when we talk about papancha, we are just talking about identifying this as a blue mouse. That's papancha. Now, because it is a blue mouse, you begin to feel whether you like blue or you don't like blue. Now, if you like blue, then you have a pleasant feeling towards this blue mouse. If you don't like blue, you have an unpleasant feeling towards the blue mouse. And that creates some concepts in your mind. Oh, this blue mouse is not a nice mouse. That is a concept. You see, papancha is not, this blue mouse is not a nice mouse. No. Papancha is, this is a blue mouse. Papancha is identification. Identification is not conceptualization. Identify, what is this? In other words, answering the question, what is this? That is identification. Conceptualization is going beyond that and say, what does this mean to me? That is concept. How does this affect me? That is concept. That is not papancha. Because people keep translating the word papancha to mean mental proliferation, it creates all the confusion in the world. So if you want to follow Bhante Punnaji's explanation, you have to then drop the meaning mental proliferation as papancha. Papancha is not mental proliferation. Maybe next sharing, I will go into mental proliferation in more details. Then you can see the difference. Because today we already covered quite a lot, talking about how concepts arise.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Do you understand, or you still have some doubts?
Because I was still thinking about papancha when it's actually you say it come from the past. So if it's from the past, then actually it's also personal. In the past, it's also
your past is personal. In other words, you interpret it, in a personal way. You don't interpret whether it affects you in one way or another. It's that whether it affects you in one way or another, that your mind begins to create the concept as a result of Vedana. In other words, this second part of Mano arises also together with the emotional reaction, the tanha of chitta. Like I said, they all arise at the same time. It's not like Mano first. Everything about Mano is finished, then only the chitta arises. No, it's not like that. They are all arising at the same time, interacting.
Yes, yes, yes.
So as you interpret the object, you begin to have a Vedana towards that object. That Vedana leads to your concepts being created. And that concept leads to a reaction, emotional reaction. And that reaction leads to intention, chetana. And chetana leads to your action, karma. And when all that is happening, you personalize that experience, upadana. And because of that, it becomes self-centered existence. So you can see they are all interacting. It's not like three separate parts of the mind. They are all interacting. But there are three ways of describing how the mind is working. The perception, the conception, cognition and conception, and the mood and temperament. Right? This is why Bhante Punnaji's teaching is so deep, but it's also very precise. So if you follow it, read the books and go through it, and then you can follow it. Okay. So next sharing, I will touch on this mental proliferation. Okay. Now we have some questions. Let's take a look. What is comprehension of reality? And the second one is there a Pali word for mental proliferation? There is no Pali word for mental proliferation, but I will explain more about mental proliferation in the next sharing. But the first question, what is comprehension of reality? I thought life is a delusion. Well, life to some people is a delusion. Maybe to some people, it may be an illusion. Right? But it is at least an illusion. Illusion is what you think is real. Delusion is when your mind begins to create very unwholesome or wrong thoughts that affect you badly. This question is best answered when we go back to that. Yeah. Okay, we go back to this. See, is life a delusion? Basically, if you learn and practice sampajana, which is the ability to discern right view from wrong, when you see something arising, you begin to realize the anicca, the dukkha, anatta behind it. You begin to realize how you react to it in terms of lobha, dosa, moha. If you constantly is aware of these things going on, then you are beginning to cultivate sampajana. So when somebody scolds you with bad words, you then use the lobha, dosa, moha to understand why is he scolding me? Because there is something I did that he didn't like. It doesn't mean whether I did right or did wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not whether what I did was right or wrong, but rather, that person thinks there's something I did that upset him. That's why he got angry and started to scold me. So if you're able to discern, he is scolding me because he is upset with me. Now, if you are able to think like that, you won't be reacting so much. But if you take it personally and you don't see these realities of lobha, dosa, moha arising, and you begin to experience self-centeredness. The moment somebody scolds you, you start to think, oh, he is insulting me. He is disgracing me. He's making me look bad. No, he's such a bad person. I'm angry with him now. So you fight with him. You see, then you are living through a delusion. So in other words, if you are able to understand the most fundamental thing that's happening in our mind is the lobha, dosa, moha. When something pleasant arises, we have lust and greed. When something unpleasant arises, we have anger and hatred. If we realize that, and we have a tendency to personalize everything, then if we can see everything in that way, we become clear. And we take it one step further. We begin to understand anicca, dukkha, anatta. Everything is happening because it is just rising and falling. Right? He's scolding me because he's upset with me at this moment. Maybe tomorrow he'll be fine. But the point is, at this moment, he's scolding me. So there is the rising. But it will fade, right? So if you understand all this, you are able to discern and through comprehension of what's going on. So in other words, if you comprehend lobha, dosa, moha, if you comprehend anicca, dukkha, anatta, then you are able to cultivate sampajana, begin to discern what is right from wrong. If you do that, your life will not be such a delusion. There might be some illusion. There's a difference between delusion and illusion. Illusion is what your mind, what your senses tell you, right, true or false. What a magician does to you, doing these magic tricks in front of you, he's creating illusion. He's not creating delusion. Delusion is wrong concepts. Okay, so in other words, wrong concept, you can say, is delusion. Concepts that hurt you, that is a kind of delusion. Okay, not being able to understand what really is going on. All this can be solved by cultivating sampajana. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, and then I see another question. Okay, good. Thank you, Vincent. I'm happy you find it clear now. Next sharing, we'll talk about the mental proliferation. Then you understand the difference between papancha and mental proliferation. But already right now, if we go back to the other picture, you can see where the difference is. Okay, I just take it back. Okay, papancha is happening when you are interpreting what you have perceived through your senses, and it leads to pleasant and unpleasant feeling about it. And then it creates all this. Now, mental proliferation happens here when your emotions begin to draw up lobha, dosa, moha, disturbing your thinking mind. And this is mental suffering, distress, domanassa. Mental proliferation arises together with domanassa. And domanassa is because your body is now tense, stressed. So the mind is disturbed. When chitta is disturbing the mano, that creates mental proliferation. In other words, mental proliferation is not created by mano alone. Mental proliferation is created here as a result of your chitta reacting by drawing from memory, and not only memory, imagination and expectation. Now, memory is something from the past. Imagination is something about the future. And expectation is something about the present. So memory tells you in the past whatever was hurting you. Imagination is drawing on your fears. You are afraid something might go wrong. That fear of things going wrong, that is your imagination. Expectation is the present. You want this to be different. Something already happened, but it's too late. I give you a present, for example. I heard that you needed a computer mouse, so I bought you a blue computer mouse and gave it to you. And then when you see it's blue, you expected, you knew that I'm aware your favorite color is green, so why did I give you the blue mouse? Your expectation is you expected a green mouse, but you got a blue mouse. You become unhappy, you see? So that is the expectation. You expected a green mouse because you know I'm going to give you a mouse for your birthday, and you know that I'm aware green is your favorite color. But somehow, without reason or whatever, I went and bought you a blue mouse. And your expectations are different from the reality. In other words, you expect something to be different from the reality. Right here and now. So expectation is dealing with present moment. Imagination is dealing with the future, the fears, right? The fears and the anxieties. Memory is dealing with the past, the anger and the hatred of whatever happened in the past. All this is mental proliferation. Okay, so we'll deal with that in more detail next time. There are many different types of mental proliferation. Okay, I hope this is already very clear. Any other question? We come to the end. Any other question? You can download the slides here, tiny URL, recollection-2. And this is all the slides I have used today.